The next real estate mistake millions of people make will probably be caused by a headline. Not because the headline is false. Most headlines are factually correct. The problem is people are drawing the wrong conclusions from them. And every day we're hearing about Iran, tired of it. Gas prices, they're too high. Inflation, everything's expensive. Interest rates, they coming down. Consumer debt, we've all got it. Government spending, they need to get that under control. Recession concerns and economic uncertainty. The average consumer is absorbing more information than ever before, yet people feel less certain about what they should do than they did 5 years ago. That isn't because information is the problem. It's because information without a framework creates confusion. And confusion creates bad decisions, sometimes really bad ones. One of the most valuable skills you can develop in real estate, investing, business, or honestly life in general is learning how to separate what is important from what is simply loud and what's really loud. Because not every headline deserves the same weight. Some headlines matter tremendously. Others create noise. The challenge is that most people have never been taught the difference. Take one of the biggest stories in the world right now, if not the biggest. Iran and instability in the Middle East. The moment geopolitical tensions increase, people immediately start asking whether the housing market is going to crash. Are rates going to go higher? Is our economy in trouble? Should we delay a major financial decision? It's an understandable reaction. They're just incomplete reactions. Successful buyers, sellers, investors, and business owners don't stop asking what happened. They ask what actually changes. That's a much better question. A geopolitical event does not automatically affect housing. It affects housing only if it eventually impacts the things that actually drive housing. Higher energy prices can create inflation pressure. Inflation pressure can influence bond markets. Bond markets can influence mortgage rates. And then finally, mortgage rates can influence affordability and consumer behavior. Notice there's a bunch of steps in between that headline and the housing market. That's an important distinction to recognize because sophisticated decision makers understand that there is often a huge difference between an event and its actual impact. Let me prove it another way. If fuel prices jump 50 cents tomorrow, does that stop a family from having a child? I think the child's still going to be coming along. What about that job relocation? You're not going to take that promotion. You're not going to move across the city or to another state. Does it stop you from getting married? What about that unwanted divorce? You still going to get divorced? If you're up for retirement, you're going to postpone retirement because of gas prices? What about moving closer to aging parents? Probably not. And that's important because life events move real estate far more often than headlines do. The news may influence confidence. It may influence timing. It may influence affordability. But life continues happening regardless of what the media cycle is talking about this week, last week, or next week. That's why housing behaves differently than most people assume. Real estate's not the stock market. We're not seeing daily volatility or by the hour. It does not usually react emotionally in minutes or hours. Housing is slower, more practical, more local. People still need somewhere to live. Businesses still need to expand. Families still need to grow. Retirees still relocate and investors are still looking for opportunities. Life continues moving forward. That doesn't mean that the current events don't matter. They absolutely do. And they can have an impact on you and me. But they matter when they change the core drivers of real estate. Employment, income, affordability, inventory, migration, lending conditions, supply, demand, and consumer confidence. That's the filter. Those are the things you need to be gauging. If a headline doesn't meaningfully affect one of those variables, it may be important globally while being far less important to your specific real estate decision. This is where national headlines become dangerous. The national housing market is useful for context, but it's not your market. What happens over in Austin? It's not happening over in Atlanta necessarily. What happens down in Miami? It's not affecting Knoxville. What happens in a luxury market is not necessarily happening in an entry-level market. Different areas have different inventory levels, employment drivers, migration trends, tax structures, insurance costs, and most importantly, buyer pools. The same headline can produce completely different outcomes in different locations. That's why context matters so much. A recession headline may sound terrifying nationally, but a market with a population growth, strong employment, limited inventory, and expanding economic activity may experience something very different than a market losing jobs and population. We went through that in East Tennessee years ago. The nation was experiencing tremendous downturn, but we had a surge. That headline didn't change though. The context did. And context is where smart decisions are made. The same thing is true with interest rates. People talk about rates as though they are the entire market. They're not. Rates matter because they influence payments, affordability, and confidence, but they are only one variable in a much larger equation. A buyer entering a higher rate environment with more inventory, better negotiation leverage, seller concessions, especially on the repairs, and less competition may actually create a better outcome than someone who purchased in a lower rate environment filled with bidding wars and inflated pricing. It happened several years ago. The mortgage rate matters. The structure of the deal matters too. And sellers need to understand this just as much as buyers. One of the biggest mistakes sellers make is assuming buyers disappeared. They didn't disappear. They just became more selective. That's a completely different problem. If buyers disappear, you have a demand problem. If buyers become more selective, you have a positioning problem. That means pricing matters more, presentation matters more, condition matters more, perceived values matter more, because today's buyers are comparing options more carefully than they did during the aggressive growth years. I think I've said that before. That's not a doom and gloom statement. It's a strategy statement. The mistake is not paying attention to the economy. The mistake is allowing headlines to replace critical thinking. Some people use economic headlines as a reason to freeze. Others use them as a reason to rush. Both can be dangerous. The better approach is slowing the decision down just enough to ask better questions. Does this headline actually affect my income? Does it affect my affordability? Does it affect my ability to hold the property? Does it affect supply or demand in the market that I care about? Does it change my timeline, my leverage, or my long-term goals? Those are the questions that create clarity, because sophisticated consumers do not pretend current events don't matter. They simply don't give every headline the same weight. They understand the difference between signal and noise. And that skill is becoming more valuable every day. There will always be something happening in the world. If it isn't inflation, it's interest rates. If it is interest rate, it's taxes. If it's not taxes, there's an election. Seems like we have one of those going on all the time. If it's not an election, it's recession fear. If it's not recession fear, there's some geopolitical conflict going on. There will always be another reason someone thinks everything is about to change. Sometimes they'll be right about the event, but completely wrong about the conclusion. The people who consistently win in real estate are usually not the people who predict the future better than everyone else. They're the people who understand what matters while everyone else is distracted by what doesn't. That's the real skill, not prediction. Interpretation. That's an important word. Interpreting the market, interpreting its impact, interpreting where you stand and how you can move forward, or if you should wait. I'm Brandon Williams. I've been in real estate since 2007. I've worked across all kinds of different types of real estate: residential, investment, land, and development throughout eastern Tennessee. And this is scale. It's where we break down real estate, business, strategy, and market psychology through a more analytical lens so people can make stronger decisions in a constantly changing environment. Join us each week, subscribe if you like what you see, and always comment and let me know your thoughts.